Hi, this is Sarit Switzer, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast, a podcast devoted to the teachings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi as recorded in his most famous work, the Tanya. My hope for this show is to make these teachings accessible and relatable to the average person, regardless of prior Jewish education or affiliation. The episodes follow the prescribed daily study portions and are meant to serve as practical lessons in how to live your life as your true self and develop an authentic and powerful relationship with your Creator. I have personally experienced the effects the study of this work has had on me, and I'm excited to share what I can of this knowledge with you. So please join me on this journey of learning, self-growth, and connection with your source. Hi, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast. This is episode 339 for the 2nd of Cheshva in a leap year. So I'm pretty sure I have mentioned previously on this podcast a book by Ryan Holiday entitled The Obstacle is the Way. If not, then I'm mentioning it now. And what this book is basically, it's based on Stoic philosophy. And Stoic philosophy is a very interesting philosophy. It's not a religion. It's a philosophy that began in Greece and then was also popularized in Rome. And the whole idea, a lot of the idea of Stoic philosophy is this idea of like having control over your mind, not letting your baser instincts get the better of you. So this book, The Obstacle is the Way, is really, it brings a lot of teachings from Stoic philosophy that are very interesting to read. And the title being The Obstacle is the Way is kind of like what the author felt was like the common ground with all of these things. That when obstacles come at us in life, rather than getting frustrated by them, rather than having them bring us down, actually try to see if you can use them as an opportunity for your growth. So this is a really nice life philosophy in general, right? And there's a lot that we can learn from it. We've spoken previously about the idea of making mistakes and how it's also been studied that specifically when you make mistakes, that's where the learning happens. That's where the neuroplasticity happens in the brain. So like, for example, if you have a gymnastics practice like I do, so when I'm practicing my handstands, whenever I fall in my handstands, that's actually where the learning happens. It's not when I get it right. When I get it right, that's kind of the result of the learning, but the learning itself is in the mistakes, is in the fall. So this is a general principle in life that the way we grow is through obstacles, through difficulties, through challenges. This is something that's kind of commonsensical if you think about it, right? But today we're going to look at it from a deeper perspective, from a spiritual perspective, and we're going to bring it back, trace it back to the beginning of the epistle that we learned about anger and about anger management. And what we'll learn today is that anger management is like sort of, okay, it's a nice step in terms of not being angry, but ultimately, what if you could take your anger and you could actually reroute it and pivot it and have this anger be your impetus for growth and for connecting with God? How cool would that be? So if you've been following along the past few episodes, we've been getting into this discussion of how it is that that anger is likened to idolatry, because really ultimately everything comes from God. And so if somebody is doing something to trigger you and arouses feelings of anger within you, then you need to recognize that this person doesn't have any power of their own. So anything that happens to you in your life, even if it's coming from another person, is just a message from God. And so really God is there and God's trying to teach you something. Right. So to be angry at the person is silly because the person doesn't have power to hurt you. The person doesn't have power to do anything, and they wouldn't be able to say any words or do anything to you that would be hurtful if God did not invest his power within him. And this led us into a deeper discussion about the whole idea of reviewing the idea that God is present within everything. The Shekhinah is here in the world. The world is constantly being vivified, something from nothing at all times, not only our world, but all the worlds, everything at every moment. And so today we're going to bring it back to this scenario, this real life scenario that the Alter Rebbe is going to bring up, make it really practical for us of how to apply these teachings to a moment when you are actually when you're encountered with this kind of situation where somebody is being annoying towards you, someone is heckling you, somebody is distracting you from doing what you need to do. especially when it comes to your service of God. So let's say you are trying to pray and there's someone in shul that is talking and being really annoying, or let's say even outside there's like a car alarm, or people screaming outside, or whatever it is, or somebody is like tapping their finger, they have a nervous twitch or whatever, and it's really being annoying to you. And let's say there's nothing you can do about it. Like, it would be one thing if you can turn around politely and tell them to stop, and you know that they're going to listen to you. But what if you know that they're not going to listen to you, and this is the situation? What do? Do you get angry, or do you just like push down your anger and just like sit there kind of like frustrated? Or is there a way that we can turn this into something positive? And so this is what we're going to be learning about today, is how to refocus, how to reorient your mindset so that your perception of the situation changes from one of anger to actually one of opportunity, to one of growth. And in short, it will bring us back to that teaching of how seeing that everything in the world really is a message from God, and really comes from the power of God, and how ultimately the only freedom that we really have is our mindset, is whether we are going to serve God or not, whether we will choose to do the right thing or not. So that's the whole HaKodesh b'yirat shamayim, chutz miyirat shamayim. Everything is in the hands of heaven except for fear of heaven. That's the one thing that we have control over, is our mindset. And just for broader context of this discussion, as I've mentioned a few times here already, the reason why the Alter Rebbe is bringing all of this up it's based on a teaching of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov taught all of this, and it was brought down in the famous compilation of the Baal Shem Tov's teaching known as Tzivat Rubash, the Testament of the Baal Shem Tov. But a lot of people, a lot of misnagdim, opposers to Chassidus, saw this teaching as heretical, because they felt like what we're saying here basically is that God is in evil. God forbid that there's like a negative and evil side to God. Like, how could we say that God is just as present in evil as he is in good? And so this entire epistle is the Alter Rebbe's response to that, and how to understand that teaching. So with that being said, let's get into the text and see how the Alter Rebbe explains all of this. So the Alter Rebbe begins, and he says that after all of these things, all of these words of truth that are revealed and manifest to all, so everything that we've been talking about so far, go back, listen to the previous episodes for context with that, just the idea of, ex nihilo creation, perpetually, something from nothing, God being here and nothing have any existence other than God. Now we're going to go back to that initial thing that we brought up, the idea of anger, which we said that being angry is likened to being like an idol worshiper. So this is so even with mundane matters. Like, even if let's say somebody just gets like a little frustrated here and there. So like, let's say you go to your car and you find that you have a ticket, and it's like you don't know why you got a ticket, and then you realize, oh man, there was a sign that you didn't notice and whatever, and you got a ticket. It's like this annoying thing. So even these kind of things, we're not excused from being angry for. We should not be angry during those times, because we should recognize the fact that everything is in the hands of heaven except for fear of heaven, as we said in Hebrew, HaKodesh b'yirat shamayim, chutz miyirat shamayim. And the origin of that phrase is actually in the Gemara in Masechet Brachos, page 33b. And so now the Alter Rebbe takes us a little bit on a tangent here, just to give this caveat that this is why it is that when it comes to we're not a person might think this whole idea that everything is in the hands of heaven, everything is divine providence or whatever, means that we should be just really passive. And if we see somebody doing something wrong or behaving in a way that they shouldn't, we should just say well, it's in the hands of heaven, whatever. This is, it's not up to us. Just let them be, whatever. So the truth is this, it's everything is in the hands of heaven except for yirat shamayim, except for fear of heaven, which means that if we should try to prevent people from transgressing, we do have a role in that. We should try to encourage people to serve Hashem. And this is how we can understand the idea that we see in Bamidbar, chapter 31, verse 14. It says that Moses was angry, V'yiktsof Moshe. So it's because you could say how is it that Moshe was angry? Moshe was the holiest man ever. And we just said anger is likened to Avodah Zarah. And so the reason why is because he was angry for spiritual reasons, because he saw that he had an opportunity to prevent the Jews from sinning. And so he took this opportunity. And because Moshe was who he was, he knew that this wouldn't be in vain. He knew that he could have an influence upon them. So in that case, that would be like a positive expression of anger. So really everything has its place in the world, even anger. However, this is only the case when you know that you can prevent a transgression from happening through your anger to your fellow. But if you cannot change the situation, like if you know that the person is not going to be able, is not going to listen to you, like for example, so this is the example the Alter Rebbe brings, is like, let's say if a non-Jew is speaking and mixing you up during your prayers. So in that case, first of all, you don't want to interrupt your prayers. Like let's say you're in a part of your prayer where you can't talk. Secondly, you know that this non-Jewish person isn't going to listen to you. They might laugh at you, or we're assuming this person's like not a very nice person, and not very respectful and everything. So then the question comes up, like, okay, so why did God do this to me? If I'm not there, if I can't prevent them, if I can't rebuke this person, I can't stop this from happening. Why is this annoying thing here? Doesn't God want me to pray? And so, yes, so God did put this person here for you. And the reason why is in order for you to prevail and to strengthen yourself even more in your prayer from the depths of your heart and with great kavanah. So it's to actually arouse you to become even more intense, to try even harder. So it's like, it's kind of like in school. Like I remember I might have told you guys this story before, that I took once, I needed credits in my university. Like I needed, credits in school. And so I decided to take an easy class. I took Hebrew, beginner's Hebrew, because I speak Hebrew fluently. And I was like, oh, this will be easy. This will be a breeze. But when the teacher found this out, that I spoke Hebrew, she was on to me and she started giving me extra work. So she started having me read Israeli newspapers, write papers on them, and do all kinds of things that the other people in the class weren't doing, because she wanted to push me. So it's a similar thing. That's a good teacher. So God too is a good teacher. So God, when he's sending you these distractions during your prayer, not only is this it's not just in order to push you away and to, annoy you, but it's actually to push you to work harder. He wants you to get even stronger in your concentration in order so that you will not be able to hear the voice and the words of this non-Jew. However, the Alter Rebbe says, he acknowledges that in order to get to this level, it's a very high level. You need a lot and it's a very intense arousal that you need. And so how do we get there? Like, what's the advice that the Alter Rebbe gives in order to get there? It comes from this idea, these subjects that we've been learning. This is why he took us on this whole journey of talking about the Shekhinah and the spirituality and all that stuff, is because what you should do is you should meditate upon the idea and place it in your heart, the idea of the descent of the Shekhinah. So we've been talking about this in the past couple of episodes, this idea of the Galus HaShekhinah. We spoke about this yesterday, right? About the background becoming the foreground. So he advises you to meditate upon this, to meditate upon the exile and the descent of the Shekhinah, and how low it descended. It descended in such a low way. He brings a citation from Eicha chapter 1 verse 9, V'tered Pelaim, that it descended in a wondrous way to become vested within the radiance of the klipos. That's how far this Shekhinah descended, that it's really there inside, in a state of exile within the klipos, in order to vivify them. And now this spark that's vested within the klipos is in a place of exile, in a very particular way. It's in its own particular exile within the words of this non-Jew that's speaking these things that mix you up in your service of God, which is meaning that in your concentration. So meaning that the non-Jew that's messing you up while you're during your prayer and distracting you, they have within them vested a spark of the Shekhinah that's exiled within them in a very particular way, particular to this non-Jew. And this is the whole idea of Zelu Matzeh that we spoke about. So meaning to say that we spoke about a lot about God's speech, right? And the holiness of God's speech. And so here, Zelu Matzeh, so we know that the supernal speech becomes vested within this lower speech, within this speech of the non-Jew who's speaking and distracting you with his words. And this is the idea of that which we learned yesterday of Ashel Shalata Adam Ba'adam L'Ralo, that we're living in this place that man rules over man, but to his detriment. So meaning, yes, we're living in a state of exile right now. And yes, negativity overpowers good. So yes, at that moment when a person's praying, that non-Jew that's speaking is messing them up. The non-Jew is the one in control. However, ultimately it's to his detriment. Why? Because ultimately you have the power to overcome this, and through a person arousing within themselves to daven even stronger, like all the person's doing basically, like if you think about it in that way, the non-Jew in that case is actually assisting the Jew to get even deeper into their prayer and to get even stronger with their kavanah, stronger with their intention in prayer, so that they won't hear what they're saying. So it's kind of like that thing, that like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger kind of thing, that it's like different obstacles that happen to a person in life. And you often see this very clearly. People who are very fully developed, very developed people, very deep people, it's often through hardships that people develop themselves so much. So that's basically what's going on. And that's the basic teaching of today, is this idea of how when we encounter different obstacles in life, and here he gives this like very specific example of a non-Jew distracting a person during prayer by speaking. So instead of getting angry at this person, you should see that the Shekhinah is vested within this person in a way of galus, in a way of exile within this person. And so then you realize and you recognize, oh wow, this Shekhinah that's exiled within this person, this is, first of all, you feel bad for the Shekhinah. So it's sort of like it's kind of like when you realize that if somebody's acting like really badly towards you, like let's say someone's yelling at you on the street or whatever, when you realize that they're crazy, it kind of changes, right? Like it's sort of like if somebody's being really mean to you and you think of them as just like a really mean person, like that's one thing. But then when you realize like, oh, okay, this person's like just like crazy, they're just like a mental person, then it actually helps, right? You realize it's outside of their control. So it's not the exact same thing here, but it's similar in the sense that when you realize that this non-Jew or whoever it is that's distracting you, that's bothering you in some way, they're not acting out of their own volition. They're acting because within them, there's a spark of the Shekhinah within them that's being vested within them, and that's what's vivifying them. And that thing that's vivifying them, that's actually there to serve as an impetus for you to grow and for you to become more challenged in your own way. Now, the Alter Rebbe here concludes the section on a technical note where he goes back to the wording in the Tzivut Rubash, which was a wording that a lot of the opponents really had a problem with, where it says shalta, where it says that the Shekhinah dwells within these, or dwells, rests within this person, the non-Jew, let's say. So he said that the person that wrote this down, like the Baal Shem Tov didn't actually write Tzivut Rubash. The Baal Shem Tov spoke in Yiddish and not in Hebrew. And so the people who wrote that book, these were people that compiled the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. And so the language isn't necessarily really precise. So when it says shalta, like dwelt or abided within the person, the real wording that it should have said is nitlapsha, which becomes vested, which is very different, and we'll see why. Because vested in a way of galus, especially, and this now we can understand why it says especially that this dwelling of the Shekhinah, or the vestment of the Shekhinah, is especially there in the case of a non-Jew. So it's basically it's like, because at first glance, if we look at it, that the wording says like shalta, that the Shekhinah dwells within the non-Jew, and specifically within the non-Jew, that's where a lot of the opponents had a problem, is they're saying like, wait, what are you saying? Are you saying that God dwells, God is present, just as present in good as he is in bad, and that really like the bad, we shouldn't judge anybody, and that like Jews, non-Jews, were all the same and there's no difference or anything like that? So the Alter Rebbe is saying, no, it's not. The wording should not have been shalta. The wording should have been nitlapsha, which means to be vested, and vested implies the state of galus. And this is why we do say that it's specifically in the case of a non-Jew, because it's specifically in the case of the non-Jew that it's found in even a bigger form of exile. And so this is the technicality about that wording that the Alter Rebbe is basically saying. And the difference is that when we say shelta, if we were to say shelta, then it implies this idea of revelation, that Hashem is like, that the spark of the Shekhinah is revealed within this non-Jew. And the Alter Rebbe is saying, no, the spark of the Shekhinah is there, but it's not revealed. The spark of the Shekhinah is just vested within them, but it's actually in a very hidden way. And now the Alter Rebbe brings another technicality, is he says, why is it that, again, we see in the Tzivut Rush, it doesn't say spark of Shekhinah, but it actually says Shekhinah. It refers to the spark of the Shekhinah as the Shekhinah itself. And isn't that a problem? Like, can't we say that it's not the Shekhinah, it's a spark of the Shekhinah? So he says, no, we see that often, there are many times that we see even like a created angel is often called God, like we see in the Parshas Vayera, according to the Ramban, that we see that there's, and this is his commentary on Bereshit chapter 16, verse 13, where we see that Hagar, but called out the name of God. So, that Hagar, she was speaking to an angel, but actually it says that she spoke out to the name of God that was speaking to her. So angels sometimes are referred to as God, and there's other passages like this as well. So we see that often angels are referred to by the name of God, even though we know that they're not God. So he says it's not a problem here, that this is similar kind of thing, that when we talk about the spark of the Shekhinah, and it's referred to as the Shekhinah itself. It's the same idea. So that's it for today. And so just to summarize, so again, when things come up in your life and when there's obstacles in your path, whether from people or experiences or whatever it is, rather than getting frustrated and angry by these things, you should actually recognize that there's a spark of the Shekhinah within all of these things. And yes, we're in a state of exile, but we have the potential to overcome this exile and to overpower this klipa by recognizing the Shekhinah that's within there and taking it as an opportunity to grow and push you harder. So not to get frustrated, not to get downtrodden, but to actually see that this is to your benefit. This is actually a good thing that's happening for you to get you closer to God, get you closer to your purpose, and become a stronger person overall. So that's it for today, and we will continue along these lines tomorrow when we conclude this epistle, actually, and I'll speak to you then. Thanks for listening to the It Is Taught podcast, hosted by Sarit Switzer. This podcast is dedicated in loving memory of my maternal grandfather, Avraham Yitzchak ben Binyamin HaKohen of blessed memory. Music by Shoshana. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, please share it with others and subscribe on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. To find out more about the It Is Taught project, including more information on my soon-to-be published book, please visit our website, itistaught.com. To catch the latest from me, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, and until then, have a great day.